He walked into the courtroom with an eerily calm demeanor, almost as if the trial had nothing to do with him. Maxwell Steven Anderson, 33 years old, sat down in the defendant's chair.
Relative to count 1, that is a Class A felony, the charge of first-degree intentional homicide. Relative to that, you shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life. And relative to this matter, weighing all of the factors that I must, looking at the galleon factors, considering your character, the severity of the offense, and the impact on the community.
Facing extremely serious charges: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson to destroy evidence. These were crimes that could put a person in prison for the rest of their life. But Anderson didn't look like someone facing that prospect. His posture was straight, his eyes steady, occasionally glancing toward the jury with an almost indifferent expression. Some people present in the courtroom later recalled that for a brief moment they saw him smirk. A fleeting smile, but enough to send chills down the spines of many in the room. The defense quickly emphasized that this case had no direct eyewitnesses. No one saw Maxwell Anderson kill Sod Robinson kill Soddy Robinson. No murder weapon was found, and much of the physical evidence that should have existed had vanished. But the prosecution saw it entirely differently. They told the jury that the absence of direct evidence was not accidental. According to investigators, the man sitting before them had spent hours after the crime trying to erase every trace. The victim's car was driven around Milwaukee in the middle of the night as if someone were trying to scramble the timeline. Then the car was set on fire behind an abandoned building to destroy DNA and fingerprints, and the victim's body was dismembered, with parts discarded at various locations around Lake Michigan. Still, Anderson maintained his innocence. He claimed he did not kill Sod Robinson, the 19-year-old who disappeared after a date in early April 2024. Prosecutors said they would rely on what Anderson could not erase: Life 360 location data from the victim's phone, surveillance footage across Milwaukee, and deleted photos from his own phone that were recovered. This is the case of what seemed like an ordinary date that ended in a crime that shocked the entire city of Milwaukee. And every detail I'm about to show you has been verified through court records, police reports, digital location data, and official charging documents. On the morning of April 2nd, 2024, at Warnemont Park in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, a man walking along the Lake Michigan shoreline with a friend spotted something on the slope near the water's edge. At first it looked like some strange object washed ashore by the waves, but as they got closer, they realized it wasn't driftwood or floating debris. It was a severed human leg. The sight prompted them to immediately call the police. Within a short time, Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office units along with the forensic team arrived at the scene. Warnemont Park is usually a quiet area along the Lake Michigan shore, with low cliffs, winding walking paths, and small wooded sections where locals often go for strolls or to view the lake. But that morning, it quickly became a crime scene. Police cordoned off the area. Investigators began photographing, marking locations, and searching for any additional clues to understand what had happened. Detective Joe Donner of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office was one of the first to closely examine the spot where the body part was found. While surveying the surrounding area, she noticed a detail that immediately made her suspect. This was no accident. The severed leg was located about 30 feet above the cliff edge, in a position where waves from Lake Michigan could almost never carry anything up there. If an object had drifted from the lake below, it would have stopped at the waterline or been pulled back by the waves. But this body part was much higher than the water level, in a spot that required someone to walk down the slope to place it there. That made Donner almost certain a body part had been brought and left at the site. With years of experience investigating crimes, she knew she was no longer looking at an accident or mishap. The initial conclusion quickly formed in the investigators' minds: this was a homicide. Moreover, the way the body part had been severed indicated something even more disturbing. This person had not just been killed, their body had been dismembered. Also on April 2nd, 2024, the Milwaukee Police Department received a missing person report. It was for a 19-year-old named Sod Robinson. Sod was born on May 10, 2004, and was attending the Milwaukee Area Technical College. Family and friends grew worried when they couldn't reach her for several hours. Those close to her said this was very unlike Sod. She usually texted or called family regularly, especially her younger sister and mother. But since the previous evening, her phone had gone completely silent. As police began gathering more information, a key detail quickly emerged. According to Soddy's friends, on the evening of April 1st, 2024, she had left home to go to dinner with a man she had recently met. It was reportedly their first date. The man's name was Maxwell Anderson. She told a few friends she was quite excited about the date. No one imagined it would be the last time they heard her name in an ordinary story. When information about a young woman going missing reached the investigators working at Warnemont Park, the two events began to be placed side by side. An unidentified body part found near the Lake Michigan shore. A 19-year-old girl who vanished just hours earlier after an evening date. At that point, there were still no DNA results to confirm the body part's identity, but to the investigators, the possibility that the two incidents were connected became too obvious to ignore. The afternoon of April 1, 2024 started like any normal workday for her. Saad worked at Pizza Shuttle, a familiar restaurant in Milwaukee where she was loved by coworkers and customers for her cheerful personality and hardworking attitude. Her shift ended around 5 p.m. After leaving the restaurant, Saad texted a man named Maxwell Anderson, 33, to confirm the date they had planned earlier. They had only known each other a short time, but Saad told a few friends she was quite excited about that evening. Around 6 p.m., surveillance cameras at the Twisted Fisherman restaurant captured Saad and Anderson meeting and sitting down to dinner together. It was the first time the two were seen together. When investigators later reviewed the footage, they noticed a small detail. Anderson talked quite a bit with the bartender and others around but interacted little with Saad. Still, at that moment, nothing in the video made the restaurant staff suspect the evening would end in tragedy. After the meal, around 7:30 p.m., Saad and Anderson left the restaurant and headed to Duke's on Water, a bar near the river. Cameras there recorded the two entering together. Inside the bar, they joined another couple in playing beer pong. People present that evening recalled that Saad seemed relaxed and laughed a lot. This was also the only period in the entire footage where investigators later saw her truly appearing to enjoy the date. Around 9 p.m., Saad and Anderson left Duke's on Water. Outside cameras showed them walking to the parking lot together. Saad drove her Honda Civic with Anderson in the passenger seat. From that point onward, data from the Life 300 CT app on Saad's phone became one of the most critical pieces of evidence in the investigation. According to GPS data, Saad's car arrived at Maxwell Anderson's home in South Milwaukee around 9:30 p.m. This matched where Anderson later admitted that Saad had come to his house after the date. But what happened next truly caught the investigators' attention. Over the following hours, Saad's Honda Civic did not return to her apartment. Instead, GPS data and traffic cameras showed the car moving around Milwaukee throughout the night. It appeared on various streets, sometimes for just a few minutes before disappearing from cameras, then reappearing in another part of the city. Investigators later said the route had no clear logic. The car didn't follow a fixed path. It seemed to just circle the city, as if the driver were trying to scramble the timeline or confuse anyone tracking the journey. Then at 2:53 a.m., on April 2nd, 2024, Life 360 data showed Saad Robinson's phone located at Wanamont Park, the exact area where the severed body part was found the next morning. When investigators checked cameras from a nearby building, they found a blurry but haunting video. In it, a man appeared on the road leading down to the lakeshore area. The footage showed him dragging something large and heavy toward Lake Michigan. Due to the distance and poor lighting, the camera couldn't capture his face clearly, but the build suggested an adult man. About 90 minutes later, the camera recorded the same person returning from the lakeshore direction. This time, he carried a large backpack on his back. That image led investigators to believe the object dragged to the shore earlier could have been the victim's body, and the backpack might have contained items used to commit or cover up the crime. Not long after, around 4:35 a.m., Saad Robinson's phone suddenly stopped transmitting signals. The battery was believed to have died or the device was turned off. Whatever the reason, from that point on, there was no more location data from her phone. To the investigators, this chain of facts began painting a terrifying picture. An ordinary evening date ended at Maxwell Anderson's home. Then Saad's car drove around Milwaukee for hours. In the middle of the night, her phone appeared at Wanamont Park, where a severed body part was found the next morning, and cameras captured a man dragging a heavy object to the lakeshore before returning alone. All those details led investigators to believe Saad Robinson's body had been disposed of in Lake Michigan that night. But at this stage, the evidence chain only showed what happened after the crime ended, not what happened before. On April 2nd and 3rd, 2024, police found the car abandoned behind an abandoned building about 3 miles from Saad's apartment, but the car was no longer intact. It had been almost completely burned. The body was charred black, windows shattered, and the interior heavily incinerated. To investigators, this was a familiar sign. Someone had tried to destroy evidence. Arson investigators were quickly called to examine the scene. After closely inspecting the seats and floor, they detected a distinctive smell of industrial accelerant. Initial analysis showed the car had been doused with a petroleum distillate, a substance commonly used to start fast, intense fires. This was not a random fire. It was arson, an intentional act to obliterate any traces linking the perpetrator to the vehicle. But even in its heavily burned state, the Honda Civic retained some crucial details. When investigators opened the trunk, they found several items Sade had worn the previous evening. Inside were her jeans, underwear, jacket, and shoes. The way these items were placed in the trunk immediately drew attention. The jeans were inside out with the underwear still attached, a sign they had been pulled off the victim's body rather than removed normally. To experienced investigators, this was a troubling detail, suggesting the victim may have been assaulted before being killed. Another detail raised further questions. When they checked the driver's seat position, they found it had been slid far back. To verify, investigators recreated the position in a similar model car at a local dealership. When a woman of similar height to Saad sat in the driver's seat with the seat positioned as in the Honda Civic, she could barely reach the pedals. Her right arm had to be fully extended to touch the steering wheel. But when a 6-foot-tall officer tried the same position, he could drive comfortably. The conclusion began forming in the investigators' minds. Saad Robinson almost certainly was not the last person to sit behind the wheel of her own car. By April 4, 2024, Anderson was initially arrested by police for questioning. He said little and quickly requested a lawyer, but that didn't stop investigators from obtaining a search warrant for his South Milwaukee home. When they entered the kitchen, one detail immediately caught their eye. On the shelves and in the drawers were dozens of knives. In total, they found more than 50 different knives. Many were large enough to inflict severe cuts. However, what disappointed investigators was that they found no clear signs of a murder scene. No large bloodstains, no evidence of hasty cleanup in the house. That made the case even more complicated. But then an unexpected breakthrough came from someone not on the suspect list. A woman named Chloe Wright, Maxwell Anderson's ex-girlfriend, contacted police after learning he was under investigation. Chloe told investigators that during their relationship, Anderson often mentioned a place he called the Secret Beach, a secluded spot he particularly liked to visit. When asked if she could show them the location, Chloe agreed. She rode with police and guided them along the route Maxwell had once taken her on. When the car stopped, investigators looked around and quickly realized something. The place Chloe had led them to was Warnemont Park, the same location where just 2 days earlier, a walker had discovered the severed leg. To the investigators, that detail no longer seemed like a random coincidence. It prompted them to revisit everything that happened the night Saad Robinson disappeared and begin piecing the facts together in a clearer sequence. From what they had gathered, the picture of Sade's final hours began to emerge. Investigators knew she had gone to dinner with Maxwell Anderson on the evening of April 1, 2024. They knew her car had arrived at Anderson's home around 9:30 p.m. And they knew that afterward her car moved around Milwaukee before her phone appeared at Warnemont Park in the early morning hours. But one big question remained without a clear answer. Why did this happen? Even the prosecution later admitted that Maxwell Anderson's exact motive was never definitively established. However, as investigators pieced the evidence together, they believed the attack most likely occurred inside Anderson's home that night. What they saw from Sade's car suggested she may have been assaulted before being killed. Her jeans and underwear were inside out in the trunk, still attached in a way indicating they were pulled off her body rather than removed normally. That led investigators to form a hypothesis. They believed that after Sade arrived at Anderson's house, he may have tried to pressure her into sex, and when she refused, the situation may have quickly turned violent. Maxwell Anderson's record showed a prior history of violence. In 2019, he was arrested after an incident during an argument with a girlfriend. When a man tried to intervene in the dispute, Anderson attacked him and was arrested for assault. Although the matter was later resolved with a lesser charge, it still revealed something important about his temperament. People who knew Anderson described him as someone who could become extremely angry very quickly when he felt challenged or rejected. But the evidence that truly convinced investigators something horrific had happened in Anderson's home came from another source. During the search and analysis of his electronic devices, digital forensic experts recovered several deleted photos from Anderson's phone. Those photos were taken inside his home on the very night Sade disappeared. In the images, Sade Robinson was lying face down on the floor. Her arm partially covered her face. A man's hand, believed to be Anderson's, appeared in the frame touching her body. Those photos left many in the courtroom later shuddering when shown. Jurors said they felt like they were witnessing a moment right after a crime had occurred. For prosecutors, the photos reinforced the theory that Sade Robinson was killed inside Maxwell Anderson's home. Afterward, according to their argument, Anderson spent the following hours trying to erase every trace of the crime. Saad's body was dismembered. The parts were taken and discarded at various locations around Lake Michigan. Her car was burned to destroy evidence. The perpetrator likely believed that by cutting the body into pieces and scattering them across the city, the truth would never be pieced together into a complete story. But over the following months, investigators continued to follow every small remaining trace. Each piece of evidence was collected, analyzed, and placed alongside the others until the full picture began to emerge more clearly. When the investigation concluded and the file moved to court, everything police had found was ultimately presented to the jury. On May 27, 2025, the trial of Maxwell Steven Anderson officially began at Milwaukee County Courthouse. Prosecutors made it clear from the start that this was not a case with one single decisive piece of evidence. No direct eyewitness, no confession, and much physical evidence had been destroyed the night of the crime. But according to them, when all the pieces were put together, the picture would become clear. The prosecution began with the location data from the Life 360 app on Sade Robinson's phone. Experts explained to the jury how the app's GPS system recorded the device's movement history over time. That data showed Sade's phone leaving the restaurant after the date, arriving at Maxwell Anderson's home around 9:30 p.m., then moving around Milwaukee for hours before appearing at Warnemont Park at 2053 a.m. That was precisely where the severed body part was discovered the next morning. Next, prosecutors presented a series of traffic camera footage collected from various parts of the city. Those videos showed Sade's Honda Civic appearing on different streets that night. However, one other video truly captured the jury's attention. It was footage from a camera near where the car was burned behind an abandoned building. In a video, a man was seen leaving the area and walking toward a nearby bus stop. When the man boarded the city bus, the security camera inside recorded his face fairly clearly. That person was Maxwell Anderson. Prosecutors also pointed out another detail in the video. Anderson was carrying a large backpack on his back as he boarded the bus. Investigators later searched for that backpack, but it was never found. Another piece of evidence was also presented in court. During the investigation, police discovered a gray jacket discarded in a trash can a few houses from Anderson's. When the jacket was sent to the forensic lab, experts found Sade Robinson's DNA on the zipper and inside the hood. This showed the jacket had direct contact with the victim. Prosecutors argued that Anderson had tried to dispose of the jacket after using it on the night of the crime. But perhaps the most striking evidence for the jury was the recovered photos from Maxwell Anderson's phone. Digital forensic experts explained that although the photos had been deleted, the data could still be recovered from the device's memory. When those photos were displayed in court, the room fell silent. In the images, Sade Robinson lay face down on Anderson's floor. A man's hand appeared in the frame, touching her body. The photos were taken on the very night she disappeared. For prosecutors, this was proof that Sade had been in Anderson's home at the time of the crime. However, the defense tried to create reasonable doubt. Anderson's lawyer told the jury that no murder weapon was ever found. Investigators also could not determine the exact cause of death because part of Sade's body remained missing. According to them, the fact that Maxwell Anderson was the last person seen with Sade Robinson was not enough to prove he killed her. They said the entire prosecution case rested on speculation and circumstantial pieces. But as the trial continued, the jury began to see what investigators had seen for months. Each individual piece of evidence might not explain the whole story, but when the GPS data, traffic cameras, bus video, the DNA containing jacket, and the phone photos were placed together, they formed a chain of events that was nearly impossible to ignore. And that chain repeatedly led back to the same name, Maxwell Steven Anderson. After many days of prosecutors and defense attorneys presenting their arguments to the jury, the trial moved toward its decisive phase. When both sides finished their final arguments, the jury was asked to leave the courtroom to deliberate. In such a serious case, many in the courtroom expected deliberations could last many hours, even days. But that didn't happen. The jury returned with their decision after less than an hour of formal discussion. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew tense as everyone stood to hear the verdict. When the court clerk read the jury's conclusion, Maxwell Steven Anderson was found guilty on all charges: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson. Those verdicts confirmed what investigators had believed very early in the investigation, that Sade Robinson had been killed and her body then dismembered to conceal the crime. But even with the verdict rendered, one big question remained unanswered. A portion of Sade Robinson's body, including her head, was never found. During the subsequent sentencing hearing, Sade's family was allowed to speak in court. Her mother, Sheena Scarborough, stood before the judge and spoke about the pain the family had endured since the day her daughter disappeared. She said what hurt the family most was not just that Sade was killed, but the way her body was dismembered and scattered across Milwaukee. Sade's younger sister, Adriana Robinson, also spoke in court. She said that since the day her sister was killed, her view of the world had completely changed. Her sister had simply gone to meet someone she believed could become a friend. But that meeting ended in a tragedy the family would have to live with for the rest of their lives. Saad's family also directly asked Maxwell Anderson to tell the truth about where her head was hidden, hoping at least they could find and bury her body completely. But Anderson did not give the answer they hoped for. When allowed to speak, he maintained his position of innocence. He told the court that Sade Robinson had left his home that night and may have been abducted by an unknown attacker somewhere near his house. According to him, what happened afterward had nothing to do with him. Those words caused many in the courtroom to shake their heads, because the chain of evidence the jury had just reviewed told a completely different story. In August 2025, the judge officially sentenced Maxwell Steven Anderson. The sentence handed down was life in prison without parole. Upon hearing the sentence, Anderson showed almost no clear reaction. He sat still with the same cold expression he had on the first day he entered the courtroom. The trial concluded, but for Saad Robinson's family, the story was not truly over. A part of her body remained missing, and they still hoped that one day Lake Michigan would return the final piece so they could lay Saad to rest completely. If you want to see more detailed true crime stories like this, please hit subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Thank you for watching to the end, and see you in the next story.